Hello and welcome to this episode of Self-Made. I'm your host, Dee Brown CEO. Joining me on the show today is Mike Gauch. Mike is the Vice President of K-12 Business Development for the P3 Group. Mike, welcome to the program, man. I'm glad to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, so Mike, I want to jump right in. I know you grew up in a small town in southern Illinois. Tell me about your childhood and where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up in a little town in very southern tip of Illinois, Elkville, Illinois, about 1,000 people. Very similar to your upbringing, some of the area you were in when you were a child. Had a wonderful family life. Both my parents raised us right. We enjoyed our time in a small town and led me into education, where I spent most of my career.
So talk to me about high school and the community that you grew up in. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a struggle for me. I was an athlete, of course, and I found out as a senior in high school that I was a big duck in a little pond. And I made a couple visits to play football in college and found out that I just wasn't cut out for college football, wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And that put a stopper on me for a while. It kind of hurt my progress, and school became a difficult thing. I went to college and I didn't really have a purpose in college because athletics wasn't there. So it was a very difficult time when I first started college. But I can remember my father, who you and I have had long talks about him. He told me one day, he said, "You better get through school," because he was a bricklayer for 40 years, and he said, "I won't hire you." So I knew at that point I better figure out what I was going to do.
So just talk to me a little bit about playing sports in high school, what position you played, and a little bit about your accomplishments there.
Yeah, I was a defensive, offensive tackle, punter, kicker. In a school our size, you just never left the field. Was all conference for 2 years. Never clicked all South or all state. We were a mediocre ball club at best.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things I've learned in life, I learned from being on a team.
Yeah.
I think that's why I enjoy this family we have here at P3, because you have a common goal and you work together to get to that end. Right. And that's it's what I thought teamwork was all about.
And I know you talked about the challenges you face leaving high school, wanting to go to college and continue to play football, but running into those obstacles. Talk to me about that and how that impacted you.
Well, it put a damper on my spirits, number one, because I'd never dreamt I would not play sports competitively. Yeah. I thought that's what I would do in college, yeah. and it was a slap in the face to find out that there was a lot better athletes out there than I was. So I kind of just tread water for a while in college and wasted a couple years actually trying to find out what I wanted to do. So as they always say, if you can't play, you coach. So I decided to go into education. I went into coaching and got to rekindle that competitive spirit that I always wanted to do.
Right. And so I know family has been very important to you. Just talk to me about your family and the impact they've had on your life.
I can't say enough about my father. I lost my father about 4 years ago, and he was an unbelievable man. I really didn't understand how smart, how intelligent he was, because he was a bricklayer. He laid brick for 40 years, and he'd come home broke down, and I couldn't understand why he would do that. And not find something that was wouldn't take such a toll on his body.
Right.
But the example he set for me about hard work, regardless of what I did, as I told you, he set me straight quick. And he was a disciplinarian, but he was fair. And I'd give anything in the world to have one more talk with him.
Yeah. So how did you make the decision that you wanted to go into education?
Well, it came back to athletics. It came back to our talks about competitive athletics. We went into education because I knew I could coach. I knew I could touch young people and make a better life for some of them. I grew up, like I said, in a small town, and I didn't know till I was 12 years old, till one of the boys from across town told me I lived on the wrong side of the tracks. So I guess I was sheltered a little bit.
Yeah.
So we were of Italian descent, and we thought we were just like everybody else. Well, the west side of the tracks was a different part of my little town. So I found out that, I wanted to make sure everybody got a fair shake in education. So that's probably what made my biggest impact on me.
So leaving college, tell me about your professional journey. What was your first career move?
Oddly enough, I was a lot bigger than I am now. My first interview, I went to a little town called Grayville, Illinois, which is around Carmi, Illinois, to interview for a job. It was a female superintendent, Miss Lillian Phillips, wonderful woman, loved her to death. But she looked at me and she said, "You're applying for my PE job and my physical education job and my coaching job." And she goes, "Mike, you're an awful big guy." I said, "Miss Phillips, I can walk on my hands the length of the gym floor." She said, "Take your jacket off." She said, "If you do it, I'm going to recommend to hire you." I made it 3/4 a quart. She said, "That's good enough for me." So she hired me there. I spent 10 years there as a teacher, a lot of coaching. Just today, went and spoke at the school one of my ex-players is at, who played for me, and spoke to his students before I came up here to be with you. We won 2 small state championships in junior high with that group, baseball and basketball. Coached a little bit of football when I moved on up to Vandalia, Illinois.
Yeah.
Then taught in Mulberry Grove and was a principal there. And then again came back to Harrisburg because of my parents. My father was fighting cancer and the job came open to come back to Harrisburg, which is a lot closer to them, and came back so I could help him through those times.
So talk to me a little bit about coaching. You seem to have been passionate about coaching. What was the thing that drove you to want to be a coach after you decided you were not going to be obviously playing as an athlete anymore, and what impact do you feel you had as a coach?
I always told my kids that whether we win a ball game or not, it's not whether I've done my job as a coach. 20 years down the line, when you've got a family, a job, kids, and I come back and see you, then I know I had a little piece of that. Now, on the flip side of that, I had some kids that I had to take some negatives from. If they didn't finish it, didn't get through school, part of that's my fault as well. But I think what I was most proud of is not the state championships, but that I was honest with kids. And kids knew they had to work hard for me, but they also knew that I loved them. And we went to battle with each other, and they knew I was in their foxhole with them, and I'd do anything I could for them.
Right. And so talk to me more about the education piece. You moved back to Harrisburg, and talk about your ascent up the ladder.
When I moved to, up the Vandalia area, I went back to Eastern and got my master's degree in education administration. I started having children. It was time to now think more about my family. The coaching was great, but there was not a lot of financial gain in coaching. So I decided to go in administration. I thought I'd have a wider touch on the educational picture. Did my master's at Eastern, also did my specialist degree at Eastern Illinois University to be a superintendent. Job came open in Mulberry Grove for the superintendent's job, and I took that. I was there for 5 years, then came to Harrisburg. And Harrisburg's really a wonderful little town, but when I came, they had a world of trouble. They had, the first week on the job, I went and borrowed money to make payroll. That's how broke we were.
Wow.
I spent a lot of those years in Springfield helping to change the funding system for Illinois schools. Worked very closely with Senator Andy Minar on that. And I feel like what we did in Harrisburg is turn the district around for a group of kids.
Right.
You were a part of that as well, as you know, and it was towards the end of my career, but we were only reaching about 50% of our pre-K students in Harrisburg.
Right.
And we needed a facility. And that's when I met you and got involved with P3, and it's been nothing but great since.
And so talk to me about your transition, from being a principal to ultimately being the superintendent of a district, and how you were able to have a broader impact based on that.
As a principal, I think you're more kid-centered, whereas as a superintendent, you have to become more public-centered, and you're more of a figurehead in some respects, and you have to go out and meet with people in the community to get things done. As a principal, maybe was more of a pleasing job because I got to deal with kids every day. A lot of times I didn't, if it got to my office as a superintendent, there was big problems.
Right.
But I feel like we had a wider grasp of what we could do educationally at the superintendent's office.
And so I know you talked about the financial straits that the district was in when you took over. Of course, when I showed up on the scene to help you all with the Bella pre-K facility, we were able to get you all an A- credit rating from Standard & Poor's for S&P. So talk to me about what did you implement from a administrative or financial management perspective to help turn the district around?
If my dad was here, he'd tell you I was in the right place at the right time. I'd like to think that all the times I came up to Springfield and met with Senator Menard and spoke in front of the Senate and talked about the inequities in funding in Illinois, that helped. But I took the job in Harrisburg when things were at its lowest, and soon after, we probably struggled the first year. I will tell you a story. I think I've showed you the video, maybe not. We couldn't afford that first year to give our teachers supply money. Usually we give them $100 supply money for the classrooms. We couldn't afford that. So I called a friend of mine who had a friend in the pro wrestling business, and he got a hold of a guy, and they came down, and I wrestled the Honky Tonk Man and Jimmy Hart, Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart.
I remember Jimmy Hart.
Yep. In a wrestling match to raise money for our teachers to have supplies.
Oh, wow.
So we raised about $5,000 that night. It was a wonderful situation to be able to give back to the teachers and let them know, hey, I'm in this foxhole with you.
Right.
Kind of like the coaching situation. But then the funding mechanism changed in state Illinois, and you got funded, and they closed the gap on those inequities, and it brought in a lot more money to our districts. And as that money started flowing, as long as you're fiscally responsible, we were able to build those reserves up until we got to a point where you came to town and we were able to do some things.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that kind of lead me to the Bella pre-K story that you were just mentioning, that we helped you execute in your last
2 years.
Yeah, last month as mayor, we opened it up.
Yeah.
I mean, not as mayor, as superintendent,
Yeah.
we opened the facility. So talk to me about the challenges you had faced trying to get that facility constructed and what it means to the community.
Sure. The traditional method of doing things in Illinois is you take it to the voters and you go to a bond referendum and you ask them to borrow more money. And in the situation we had been in, the community was very scared of that.
Yeah.
They didn't want to go that route. They were worried we were going to fall back into that same hole. Hence, bringing you on the scene, and we sit down and talked. And again, your business method and how you do things was not common in Illinois. As a matter of fact, I think we were the first facility in Illinois that tested the statutes to show that it was legal to do.
Yeah.
And it was the only way we'd have got this done. And what has it done for our kids? I need to send you a film. The amount of kids we have in that building every day now, we went from 2 classrooms to 8 classrooms full of children. Right. We have not tried to do it any other way other than go through our architect, and they were giving us 1/5 the building that you were able to put up for us in the situation we did in Harrisburg. And I cannot wait till November when Grandin and I go to Chicago to the Illinois State School Board Convention, and we're taking our school attorney, Mr. Mike Wagner, you know. Yep. Mike, yep. Works for Senator Claiborne, and then our pre-K director, Pam Rizkala, who put the design on a napkin when we started with your group.
Right. That's right.
They're going to do a case study on our Bella program, and I can't wait to go up and tell the state about what we've been doing down south.
Speak to the viewers about the importance of early education for children, because those first grades, K through 3 are really the most critical years for learning. And so I know that this Bella Pre-K school, it has served the community to give them that head start with their educational journey. So just kind of talk about the importance of early childhood education.
Without question, and probably a better person to be here would be my wife, who's a kindergarten teacher in Carbondale, Illinois. But what I will tell you is the socialization part when the kid's 3 and 4 years old, and bringing them in and just having them in a group, recognizing letters. If you can get all that taken care of by 3 and 4, you're escalating that kid's education tenfold.
Right.
And reading comes much more simple that way. Sight words are something that they learn usually in kindergarten. When they get out of Bella at Harrisburg, they've got all those taken care of. So we move right into reading, and we've got 5-year-olds that can read 2nd and 3rd grade books now. And that's what bringing those kids in early does.
Wow. And so, and statistically speaking, if you're behind by the 3rd grade, your chances of completing high school dwindle significantly.
Yeah, our graduation rate's in the high 80s, and we won't know for years, but I do believe this will bring those numbers exceptionally higher.
Up even further.
Yes. Yes.
So now you are the Vice President of Business Development for the K-12 division of the P3 group. Just kind of talk to me about the role you play at P3 and your mission and goal in that space.
Well, my role is to go out and make people in Illinois and other states understand what a wonderful business model this is, and what you can get for your money is so much better. As I said, we had our architect draw up a 2-room add-on to a elementary school with a foyer, and it was going to be almost what we paid for the Taj Mahal that you guys put up for us at P3. And I'm just trying to get people to understand that. I brought people in. I had a gentleman in from down south day before yesterday to come in and look at our pre-K. He wants to do one. They just need to know the model, and I think it's my job, since I've been through it, to go out and preach that.
Yeah.
And preach that. My goals is to help those schools like Harrisburg, who has a tough community, who has a community that's not necessarily wanting further taxed, but you can look at their spreadsheet and say, you can afford this lease payment, we can get you in something that will help your kids.
Right.
That was probably the biggest selling point, Mr. Brown, and you know this, for P3, it was just not a building project to you. Right. You come in and you wanted to help this community. I know you've probably talked about it on other programs, but you brought in your foundation and offered us free summer tutoring for our math and reading kids.
Yeah.
That's unheard of. I've done building projects in education for 30 years. Nobody's ever done that for me.
Right.
Nobody's ever done that as a superintendent. Not to mention, the one thing as a superintendent, there's no overruns when we do a project with P3.
Right. Right.
That grand maximum price sets it, and set it and forget it until it's done. You know what I mean?
Set it and forget it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you a little bit about just your philosophy on community and reaching back and giving back to your community and being part of the fabric of your community. What's your take on the importance of that?
Without question, Harrisburg has become a home to me. It's not where I was born and raised, but it's become a home. And again, I'll go back to our project. I feel like me pushing P3 and the project that you brought to the table was giving back to the community, because as a group, you told us you would do 80% local labor, and that money would regenerate in Harrisburg, and it would help the community. We ended up at 93. Yeah. I think 93% on that project. Right. And everybody in the community that was a part of it is benefiting from it. Not only the children, but the economic base, which is what we have to do in areas like you grew up in, I grew up in, and where I was working. You've got to do that, because the big companies aren't coming to those towns. Yeah. We've got to figure out a way to self-sustain it and help each other.
So in terms of your professional and academic life and where you are today, who would you say has been, I guess, the most influential person in your life, and why?
My father. Without question, my father raised me to work hard no matter what I did. He told me if you're going to be a bagger at a grocery store, be the best bagger they ever had. He instilled that in me. He showed me, he modeled it to me, and he was a hell of a good person. He was very honest, sometimes brutally honest. I will tell you a story. You know, I told you I thought I was a football player. I told you I was a big guy.
Yeah.
When I was my 8th grade birthday, my mother bought me an autograph book, and first person I asked to sign my autograph book was my dad.
Yeah.
I know my dad loved me, but here's what he wrote in my autograph book. Roses are red, and the scene's going to shine. If you don't lose some weight, you'll never get off the line. That's what he wrote in my book. Love Dad.
Love Dad.
And he was right. I had to lose some weight and get in shape to play football. But he is without question the most influential person in my life.
And you talked about the impact. You touched briefly on the impact that playing sports had on your life. And I would just like for you to kind of expand upon that, because a lot of people that have not played sports in high school or college don't really understand all of the skills and leadership abilities that are developed through that process.
I touched on part of this today at my speech at the school. You know, the team aspect is something you better learn if you're going to go into the business world. If you're going to be in any kind of position, you're going to have to work with people. And the example I gave today, which I think is probably the biggest example I had, is you're going to have to work with some people that you're not fond of.
Right.
You know,
right.
I know there's a bunch of teachers in Harrisburg that wasn't fond of the superintendent that just retired. That's okay, but we had a mission. We had a job to do.
Right.
My quarterback, I didn't like him. Didn't like him, still don't like him to this day, but on Friday night, nobody touched him because that was my job.
Right.
And I think if you believe in that concept, that's what team sports teaches you. It teaches you that you all have to work together to get to the goal. It's not me, it's we. Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of times people don't get that. Most people feel like in order for us to work together or accomplish a mission or goal, we have to be aligned in terms of me liking you, or, you know, best buds or whatever you want to call it. But I oftentimes find myself in situations where I work through issues and problems with individuals, and I do that because it's in the best interest of what I'm trying to accomplish. And so what I learned to do over time is to not take disagreements or words personally. At the end of the day, I know sometimes people perceive me as being, you know, or whatever, because of maybe how I interact. But really, all I'm trying to do is accomplish a goal, and it's never personal. And so when I find myself on the other side of the situation, and I view someone as, you know, I don't like them or like what they're doing, I learned not to take it personal.
Right.
And to just treat it as a transaction and understand that my goal is to work through the situation and complete the transaction successfully. And that's the only goal I have.
And as a leader, I think a lot of times as a leader, it is when you really learn that. Yeah. I think as a superintendent, when I first understood that, you know, I had a professor that told me it's hard to remember when you're up to your hind end in alligators that your job is to row the boat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at the bottom, at the end of the day, we've got a job to do, and we've got a goal. Everybody wants that goal to come true. We don't have to go to dinner after. We don't have to hang out after. We just need to work together. Now, I will say, it's been pleasant to work in a group that we can be so amicable. I think I've never had so much fun working as I have with P3. We get along, we laugh, we have fun. But at the end of the day, there's going to be days, and there have been, you've called me and said, Mike, we can't do that. We just can't do that. And I think the reason I'm able to handle that is because I've been in a leadership role, and I know that's your job.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people don't get it, and some people take it personal.
Yes.
And just to kind of close up, as we wind down, just talk to me about leadership and the importance of leadership, whether it's business, family, community, etc.
I think in any leader's role, you have to be brutally honest. And again, I go back to my father. My father taught me that. It does us no good if we've got a goal to sugarcoat things to people, or we're not going to get there.
Right.
If you're not carrying your weight, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, or if you did something wrong, as a leader, I need to tell you that.
Right.
And then when we get done and we end up succeeding, we're going to celebrate that, and we're going to learn from it, and we're going to move on to the next one.
That's right.
And I think that's community. I think that's business. I think that's family.
Yeah.
And now, I know from our wives hanging around together, me and you may not lead lead the household.
Not far.
No. We are the king of the castle when the queen's gone.
Yeah.
That's about all I have.
That's right.
But truly, I think that is what it is. I think, as a leader, you have to be brutally honest, and you have to, for lack of a better word, take the arrow sometimes, because you're going to have to be the bad guy if things aren't going the way they're supposed to.
That's right. And you also have to be the one who accepts responsibility when your team have a shortcoming.
Yep.
Sometimes people have the inability to fall on the sword and just take responsibility and be accountable for the actions of the people that they lead. And oftentimes the inability to do that oftentimes damage relationships far beyond the actual act. Right?
Yeah, agreed.
So, Mike, I want to thank you for being on this episode of Self-Made. I'm your host, Dee Brown CEO. And remember, thank you for watching. And without you, there's no me.